The incident recalls the historical injustice of Rosa Parks being told to move to the back of the bus. That was almost 70 years ago, which sparked the Montgomery bus boycott, galvanized civil rights movement. And despite the passage of more than 6 decades since the situation involving Parks, incidents like this continue in 2024, highlighting ongoing challenges with racial equality in the United States. This report notes that previously, American Airlines faced 2 discrimination accusations just last year, 2023. One was involving track star Sha'Carri Richardson, and the other involving musician David Ryan Harris. Wow. Sharon, thoughts here?
My thoughts are that if people keep saying American Airlines is being racist towards them, American Airlines is being racist. And I don't want to hear any more about bias training. And the NAACP should probably reinstate that travel advisory to Black people, because there's a good chance, apparently, that you will not be treated appropriately. If you want it to stop and you're in charge, it's quite easy to let your personnel know what will and will not be tolerated.
That's right. Well said.
Several days later.
After we initially made contact with American Airlines, they indicated that Judge Bill was intoxicated.
Highly intoxicated.
And
wow.
Any of her friends who know her know that she does not drink like that. And if she was so intoxicated, as they described in their response, then why didn't they arrest her?
All right, guys. So once again, we got to talk about one of these race hustling stories that sound too good to be true. And if there's one lesson I have learned from doing this job for basically 4 years now, is that if the story sounds too good to be true, that probably means that it's not being told accurately, or that some parts of the story are probably not true, right? And I think that that's what's going on with this story right here, involving this Black judge who is accusing American Airlines of racism because she was told to use the bathroom at the back of the plane, although she was sitting in first class, because she was slamming the door when she went to use the bathroom. Okay, so she goes to use the bathroom in first class. She apparently slams the door, according to the flight attendant, and the flight attendant warns her about it. And then after the second time she did it, the flight attendant told her, okay, well, you need to go use the bathroom at the back of the plane because you keep slamming the door, disturbing fellow passengers. Now, again, this story, to me, sounds like it requires some real investigative journalism and questioning of the judge to make sure that, hey, this was actually really racism and not just you getting upset because the flight attendant told you that, hey, you can't be slamming doors, okay, because you're disturbing other passengers. And essentially, you took this microaggression as some act of racism, right? That is what should happen, okay? That's the approach that should be taken when you are investigating a situation like this. But again, because this woman is Black, race hustlers like Rashard Ritchie, they're going to believe her no matter what. And you would think that Rashard Ritchie would have learned from taking the sides of people based off race when it comes to these stories, these accusations of racism, because this guy was on the verge of getting sued for defamation because of him siding with the Black teenagers in the City Park Karen story, right? You guys remember the story about the white woman who wanted to get the city bike. She was pregnant. She was going to ride it home, and the Black teenagers was basically accusing her of stealing their bike, even though the dude did not have the bike at the time, evidenced by the receipts that came out later from this woman's lawyer. Again, Rashard Ritchie jumped the gun and said this was racism and tried to ruin this woman's life over false accusations, okay? Just straight up believing the person without really doing critical thinking and investigating the situation and really figuring out, okay, what happened, okay? And he's doing the exact same thing here. He's just taking this woman's word for it, even though, in my opinion, I think her story sounds sketchy in the sense that I'm not saying that she's not telling the truth. I just don't see any evidence of racism, right? That's where I'm coming from here, okay? So again, I'm not accusing this woman of lying. I'm just saying, I don't think there's any racism going on here. I think this is what we call a microaggression. And she's trying to say that is racism. And I don't think it's racism. I just think that she doesn't like being told that, hey, you can't be slamming the doors while you're using the bathroom in first class. So without further ado, I want to react to this video because this story is going viral as an example of the racism that black people experience, particularly when it comes to American Airlines. Now, this story is also being used as an example of racism alongside what happened to Sha'Carri Richardson. You guys remember that story? She was using her phone on the plane, and the flight attendant told her, hey, you need to put your phone in airplane mode. You need to put it away, okay, before we take off, which is standard procedure, okay? And she refused to do it, and then she essentially ended up getting kicked off because she didn't follow the rules. Yeah, they use that. Rashard Richie uses that as an example of the racism against American Airlines, which is more evidence of the fact that I think that this is BS, right? So without further ado, let's get into it.
Well, first of all, we boarded American flight from Chicago to Phoenix, and we were on first class. So when I say we, I'm referring to my husband and my mother. The first thing that happened was the flight attendant attempted to get my husband to change his seat so that someone else could sit next to the person they wanted to sit next to. Now, my mother is 4A, I'm 4C, and my husband is 4D. So the guy in 4F did not want my husband sitting there. He wanted someone else to sit there. My husband refused. He refused to do it. And the flight attendant left. And then I think he came back a second time to make sure that my husband would not give up his seat. And my husband was very, very emphatic about, I'm not giving up my seat. This is my wife and this is my mother-in-law, and I have to take care of them. So that was it. And that is something that my husband says he always felt as though that's what started this all. Since he couldn't do him, then he ended up doing me. And when I went to the restroom the first time, when I came out, he told me that I slammed the door and that there are people sleeping on the flight. And if you look around, most of those people had iPads, earplugs, and he said they were sleeping. I was disturbing them. I didn't say a word. I just walked onto my seat.
Yeah, so you can already tell just from the beginning of this story, the desperation coming from this woman in regards to trying to establish some credible reason why the flight attendant would be picking on them, right? Basically what she says is that, well, my husband didn't give up his seat to some other person, so therefore the flight attendant was angry about it. Now, again, I'm not entirely sure why that would upset the flight attendant or why a flight attendant would be mad about her husband not giving up his seat to somebody else, because quite honestly, I mean, I don't think it really matters to them that much, okay? They may try to facilitate it if it just, you know, makes the flight more enjoyable for everybody, but if he says, I'm not going to do it, I'm not sure exactly why the flight attendant would be upset about it and then turn around and take it out on her. Okay, which is what she's saying here is that, well, it started because the flight attendant was upset that my husband would not give up his seat. But again, I'm not entirely sure why a flight attendant would care that much, okay? They only care enough to make people happy, but if you're not going to do it, then I think they just kind of move on. Now, also, again, this is first class, and I've flown in first class maybe 3 or 4 times in my life, not that much, so, you know, maybe I can't really speak on it. Maybe some of you guys that have flown first class a lot more than I have can tell me if I'm right or wrong. But typically when you fly in first class, the flight attendants kind of go out of their way to treat you better than how most people get treated in economy, right? I think when people experience rude behavior from flight attendants, it tends not to happen in first class because you're paying for a better experience, right? In fact, in first class, they don't make you wear a seatbelt. They don't make you put your laptop away. They don't make you follow all the stupid rules that you have to follow in economy. And that's how I kind of figured out that the whole economy thing was a scam, right? In regards to some of these safety procedures. So my point is that typically speaking, this is not how somebody would be treated in first class, right? The flight attendants are going to go out of their way to make sure that you're having a great experience because you're paying for that. And I can imagine that a first class flight from Chicago to Phoenix is not cheap, right? It's not a cheap first class ticket. So again, this is a longer flight and you're sitting in first class, I personally don't think that a flight attendant is going to go out of their way to be rude or to cause you problems. They're going to do everything they can to make sure that the flight goes well for you because, again, you paid for that luxury experience. I'm not sure if you can call first class in American Airlines luxury, but I'm just saying, this is typically how it works. So again, this is why I'm skeptical of this woman's story. I really think that she is crying about what we call microaggressions rather than real acts of racism here.
The second time that I used the restroom, when I came out, he said, I told you not to slam the door. So from now on, you're to use the bathroom at the back of the plane. I looked at him and I told him there were other people that had used the restroom. There were 3 white guys that used the restroom and you didn't say anything to them about slamming the door. And I just went to my seat and sat there.
Okay, so here's another part of the story that I found to be sketchy, okay? So in all the stories that she tells, even in the complaint, she does not say what the race of the flight attendant is, okay? And I believe that she kind of accidentally says that the flight attendant was a he, okay? So I think we're talking about a male here. But they won't reveal the race of the flight attendant. She doesn't say. However, she does say the race of the passengers that were sitting around them. Again, I got questions because if this flight attendant was white, there's no reason. In fact, there's actually an incentive for her to come out and say this guy was white, right? That would help boost her claims of racism. But since she's not saying the race of the flight attendant, then we know it's almost like 99% certain that the flight attendant wasn't white, right? So again, I'm pretty sure that's the case. Now, again, I could be wrong. I'm just saying that I find it to be suspicious that she's not revealing the race of the flight attendant, but she's revealing the race of the passengers around her, which tells me that the flight attendant probably wasn't white. Just something to think about.
The third time that I went, he followed me back to my seat. He touched me on my shoulder, told me that I was going to be arrested because he didn't like the way I spoke to him and that I hit him. I told him I did not hit you. And that was it.
Okay, so again, these are the questions that I would be asking, okay, if I was interviewing this woman. Of course, Rashard Ritchie's not going to ask these questions. But again, it seems to me you're leaving out some information, okay? Because you say you went to the restroom again for a third time. Okay, which one did you go to? He told you to use the restroom at the back of the plane the second time, right? This is what he told her allegedly. Now, I don't believe he actually commanded her to do that. I believe he probably said, well, listen, if you're going to slam the door, I'm going to ask, can you use the restroom at the back of the plane so that, you don't disturb the first class passengers, right? That's probably the way he framed it. If he actually really said that, we really don't know. Again, this woman's trying her best to be Rosa Parks, right? Rosa Parks of planes, right? This is what she's trying to do. But we're missing some information here because apparently the third time she used the restroom, again, she doesn't specify exactly which one did she use. Did you go to the restroom at the front of the plane or the back of the plane? Because if you went to the one at the back of the plane, I'm not entirely sure why the flight attendant would bother you again if you used it at the back of the plane. Now, if you use it at the front of the plane, if you defied the flight attendant's orders and you slam the door again, which again, she's leaving out, again, key information, I really don't know, that will be more reason for the flight attendant to approach you again. So she's leaving out key details to explain why would the flight attendant approach you after going to the restroom for the third time and accuse you of hitting him, right? Like that's a heavy accusation, okay? So at what point in the interaction would he have a reason to believe that you hit him? That part of the story she's not really telling. She's purposely leaving that out because I have a hard time believing that a first-class flight attendant would actually accuse a passenger of hitting them if they didn't have good reason to believe that that's what the person did, and then calling the police. I'm trying to figure out what incentive. Is racism really a strong enough incentive to do something like that? Because best believe, if you are a first-class flight attendant and you accuse a first-class passenger of hitting you and you're doing it falsely just because you're racist and you call the police, you better be ready to lose your job. You must not value your job, right? You must value being a racist more than actually keeping your job. I don't think that's the case, right? I actually really don't think that is the case here, okay? That's what you would have to believe in order to believe this woman's story.
The plane, right before it landed, the pilot had said that everyone is to remain seated because we're going to have law enforcement come on board. Law enforcement did not come on board. They were at the bridge. But when the plane landed, an American Airline rep came to my seat, asked me to follow him, and I did. I asked my husband to take care of my mother. My mother, well, that's not important, but I asked him to take care of my mother. I get up and I leave. All of this is happening in front of them. And, I go out and the police are there. And so I went to one of them and he was in front of me. And I said, I understand that you're arresting me. There was a policeman in back. And if anyone saw the movie Karen on Prime Video, he reminded me of that policeman. And he told me, go get your bags from baggage. I told him I don't have any bags.
Here she go, basically accusing the police officer of being racist, right? Again, everybody's racist, okay, because of microaggressions. Again, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, okay? Any pro-black woke revolutionaries, right, watching the video, tell me if I'm wrong. I haven't heard anything yet that is clear-cut racism. I've heard a lot of microaggressions. I've heard a lot of, well, the flight attendant told me to do something I didn't want to do, or the flight attendant corrected me, but I haven't heard anything concrete in regards to this was racism. Haven't heard it yet.
And I continued to talk to the gentleman that was in front of me. So I told him, I understand that you're here to arrest me. And he said, no, we are not arresting you. You can leave. Now, when at that point, the American Airlines rep took me out, and we're sitting at the gate, and he asked me what happened, and I explained to him. When he left, a woman came over to me and said that she was sorry, I overheard your conversation, and I want you to know the same thing happened yesterday, which was February 9th. And I said, what did you say? And she said the same thing happened yesterday. And I didn't get her name. I didn't know if she was an airline employee or airport employee, but that was interesting to me. And then
yeah, it is interesting. And you definitely need some witnesses to back up this story because I'm not buying it. I'm just not buying it, bro. I'm just not buying it. Okay, listen to this. She says, well, some random person, okay, who I'm assuming was not a passenger, because if she's saying the same thing happened yesterday, that must mean that she is an airline employee, right? That she would have knowledge of something like this happening the day before. Again, that wouldn't be just a regular passenger. What exactly did she mean by, well, the same thing happened yesterday? Because if you are, in the, I guess, tunnel or whatever, right, with the police, and you're boohoo whining crying racism, like she's doing right now, oh, it's racism, okay? If you're boohoo whining crying racism, maybe the woman came up to you and said, hey, listen, the same thing happened yesterday, in the sense that that flight attendant also told somebody on the flight that, hey, stop slamming the door, right? If you're going to slam the bathroom door, then use the bathroom at the back of the plane, which would be evidence that, hey, you are not being discriminated against. This is not racism. This flight attendant is not just picking on you because you're a black woman, right? That to me seems to be why that woman would say that, right? Because you're trying to say that this happened because you're black, and you have another employee telling you, or a lady that works with this person telling you, no, it didn't happen because you're black. This happens to everybody who engages in the behaviors that you engaged in. Maybe that's what she was talking about. Again, it's just so funny to me how these key details are just left out of the story. Key details that can help kind of explain what is going on here, right? She's telling the story in a way that makes it seem like, oh, well, this is happening to me because I'm a black woman, even though there's nothing that I've heard so far that says that this has anything to do with race whatsoever. Nothing, okay? But this is the angle that she's getting at here. This is the angle that she's getting at. Again, it's fascinating. It really is. I can't imagine living my life like this, thinking that any type of microaggression, anytime something doesn't go my way, it must be some form of racism. It gotta be, well, this person doesn't like me because I'm a black woman, right? Because I have a hard time imagining that if what this woman says is true in regards to, well, a woman came up to her and said the same thing happened yesterday, and the same thing as in the flight attendant essentially called the police on a passenger because they accused the passenger of hitting them and not talking to them, correctly or whatever. If this flight attendant is making these false claims, which is what she's implying here, right? Then I don't think the flight attendant would be working in first class. I really don't. I think they'd be fired, right? I'm pretty sure they reserve the first class flight attendants for those that, have some thick skin, right? Because you got to have thick skin, okay? Flight attendants that aren't easily pissed off to the point where they're going to start doing all types of microaggressions and mess up the company's money because their feelings are hurt, right? I'm sure that's the case. I'm sure that flight attendant, if they were so trigger happy to just call the police for no reason, falsely, I'm pretty sure they would not be a first class flight attendant. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be working for the airline. I'm just saying, right? I'm trying to use logic and reasoning to explain this. Again, these are questions I would have, but again, Rashard Ritchie, he never asked these types of questions. He just believes this, even though to me, this seems to be not very plausible.
As I'm sitting there, all these people are coming off, they're looking at me, they're snickering and all this other kind of stuff. But
why are they snickering? Why are they snickering? Again, we're going to find out here in a few minutes. Again, a real plausible explanation for all of this, okay? We're going to find out here in a few minutes.
You have I think the flight attendant was 30-ish. I'm 70 years old. And for someone to be pointing their finger at me in my face, very close, because it was close proximity. It was berating, it was humiliating. But I knew I was not going to say anything to him because I think they want you to say something so that they would have an excuse to arrest you. I was not arrested. I ended up talking to that policeman the next day, the one that I told you that I was talking to. And he told me the flight attendant had no authority to say that I was going to be arrested. He said the only person that has that authority is me, the police officer. He said, so he never should have threatened that you were going to be arrested. So that was basically, the story.
This is heartbreaking, makes my blood boil. A lot more detail to the story. Attorney, let me go to you because there seems to be
this guy, again, I can't believe he markets himself as a critical thinker. Now, again, if this was some conservative, right, if this is somebody that he disagreed with politically, if this woman wasn't black, right, if she was accusing, if this is a white woman accusing a black person of racism, do you think he would just go along with this story? Or do you think he would actually try to ask questions and poke holes? I mean, there are obvious holes in this story, right? Like, I'm not just trying to, say that the woman's not believable and her story's not credible just to say it. No, I'm telling you just from listening to it, it just doesn't make sense to me. Instead of actually asking questions, right, about the obvious holes in this story, he just goes along with it. Later on, while they're telling the story, they're going to reveal American Airlines side of the story, and American Airlines, unsurprisingly, accused this woman of being drunk and aggressive, which should surprise nobody.
You should note that after we initially made contact with American Airlines, they indicated that Judge Bill was intoxicated.
Highly intoxicated.
And
wow.
Any of her friends who know her know that she does not drink like that. And if she was so intoxicated, as they described in their response, then why didn't they arrest her? Why did they let her go back and escort her mother off the plane, her aging mother off the plane? If that in fact was the case, this is far from the case. That's just another level of disrespect that we've had to deal with American Airlines.
As well as being highly intoxicated. I was aggressive. They alleged that I was aggressive with the flight attendant. You intentionally know what not to say to people when they are trying to edge a confrontation with you.
Mhm.
And those police officers in Phoenix, I'm standing there, I'm talking to him, I'm just very close to him. He could have smelled liquor. He told me to go ahead and just get, and very polite. That particular officer was very polite. Just go ahead and get your bags.
The officer obviously observed the situation and saw that it was a big nothing burger. Sometimes they kind of come guns blazing, no pun intended. But naturally they assess, and he's right. The officer is the one who makes the judgment call, not the flight attendant.
Yes, Rashard, the officer assessed the situation and found that, okay, we have what allegedly, according to American Airlines, is a drunk 70-year-old woman who, probably was being aggressive with the flight attendant. Allegedly, according to the flight attendant, according to her story, she hit the flight attendant, which would be a legitimate reason for why the police would get called in a situation like that. But the police officer is not going to arrest her because she's drunk, right? Being drunk on a plane is not illegal, okay? Hitting a flight attendant is illegal. Who knows if that actually really happened, right? Or the flight attendant accused her of that. But the officer assessing the situation and letting her go back and get the bags is not evidence and proof that the flight attendant was racist or that this woman was done wrong in any way. It's really just evidence and proof that, this is just not a situation really worth doing anything about, because again, we have a 70-year-old woman who was probably intoxicated. It's just best to let it go, right? And that's probably what happened. Now, notice how this woman and her attorney never denied the accusation of drinking, right? In the sense that they didn't say, well, I didn't drink at all on the flight. I could not have been intoxicated because I didn't drink. Now, we all know on first class, flight attendants, the first thing they ask you when you get on the plane, what do you want to drink, right? That's the first thing they ask, okay? So this woman didn't say, hey, I had not been drinking at all, so there's no way I could have been intoxicated. She didn't deny taking a drink or anything like that. She says, well, everybody that knows me knows that I don't drink like that, right? Not everybody that knows me knows I don't drink. I don't drink like that, right? Those are two very different things, okay? Two very different things. Now, me personally, I think that American Airlines, in their alleged explanation here, saying that the woman was drunk, seems to be more plausible in regards to what really happened, okay? That can explain this whole situation rather than her story, right? Because in my opinion, her story only adds up. It only makes sense if she was in fact drunk, which I don't know, right? I don't know. But I also, again, don't know why a flight attendant would go out of their way to call the police and to allegedly have the woman threatened to be arrested for hitting them if the woman was not aggressive in some way. And I can imagine that, hey, it's plausible that maybe she was, right? And I think that's a part of the story that she's leaving out, okay? Because her story, again, has a lot of holes in it, right? A lot of questions that should have been asked by Rashard Ritchie that wasn't asked, because, again, they love believing these stories that sound too good to be true, right? But she's trying to sue American Airlines. Who knows? Maybe this could be a way to try to get an easy settlement. I have no idea. But, American Airlines seems not to be going for it, right? Typically in a situation like that, if, you got a black woman, a judge also as well too, accusing you of being racist, a lot of these airlines, if there's even an ounce of credibility to the allegations, they'll fold, right? They'll just fire the person, and just fold and come out with an apology and, do the tap dance. But if American Airlines is sticking with their guns and saying we didn't do anything wrong and they standing by their employee, best believe, it's probably likely that this woman wasn't telling the whole story. But y'all let me know what you think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.